Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here for this session on the female economy. I'm Aude de Montesquiou. I'm the global facilitator at FinEquity, a community of practice hosted by CGAP dedicated to women's economic empowerment through financial inclusion. We have over 9,000 members globally, and we have two regional hubs, one in Latin America in Spanish and one in Africa that's facilitated by Tariro Nyimo, who's on this webinar today from DFI. It's a great pleasure to be here. We have 2 speakers and a half. I want to say we have 2 speakers physically here, and hopefully one will join us while we speak. First here is David, who leads MercyCorps' refugee finance program in Uganda. And then second, we have Tariro Nyimo, who's the deputy director at DFI, and who's also the FinEquity Africa facilitator. We might be joined in the course of this session by Ifeoma Uddoh, who's the founder of Shecluded, a fintech company aimed at women in Africa. So with that, I want us to get started for this really interesting, hoping to be a very interesting session on the female economy. We know that women globally have a very powerful force in the global economy, but that there's a great untapped business potential. And we hope that women's financial inclusion can become more and more of a powerful tool to boost gender equality and facilitate inclusive economic growth across Africa. We know that financial inclusion alone is not the magic wand to solve issues of gender equality, but we believe that appropriate financial services, including savings, credit, insurance, and payments, can help foster women's social and economic empowerment. What we know is that women in Africa remained underrepresented in financial services, and they're underrepresented as customers with financial service providers, and they're also underrepresented globally in the workforce. Even though the latest data, such as fintechs, show that the gender gap in financial inclusion in Africa is lowering, globally, we see that over 700 million women remain excluded from financial services. In the previous session that I was moderating, we talked about how digital financial services had in recent years helped close the financial inclusion gender gap. We were talking about Mozambique and Zimbabwe in that previous session. But then again, the GSMA report that was launched last week shows that there is still a large gap in women's access to internet on their mobile. The gap is largely women and rural areas. And so women remain with lower access than men to mobile devices and to internet through mobile devices, thus affecting their ability to access digital financial services. We know that all these barriers influence women's ability to participate globally in the economy. And we're going to talk about issues of female leadership, the female investment gap, and the lack of taking into account women's preferences and needs in the design and the delivery of financial services. So with that, I'd love to turn to the speakers here and start asking you a few questions about, in your view, maybe starting with Tariro, in your view, what are the main challenges that women still face in accessing financial services in Africa? What are the main barriers to women's access in financial services in Africa?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. And just to paint a context, I think starting with the continent that we are in sub-Saharan Africa, women make up 58% of Africa's self-employed. And the self-employed population contributes to about 13% GDP. So you will see that this is a significant contribution. And this is a World Economic Forum. And it is said by the World Economic Forum that the women or the female economy, which is what we're talking about today, is the world's largest emerging market. So there is a business case to the female economy. And to talk about sub-Saharan Africa, and I think this is a theme that has been coming up in some of the sessions, has the highest rate of women entrepreneurs. And there's a data point of 26% women participate in entrepreneurial in Africa in entrepreneurial activities to the extent of around 26%. But access to finance or the financing gap is pretty huge, and we define it as the demand for finance, and that is from MSMEs, and then the availability that is given to them. And we see that I think there's a data point of 1.7 trillion, and I think that's for emerging markets. But how we can solve this, right? It's through meeting women where they are. So through gender intentional product design, I think, and this is a priority within FinEquity Africa as well, that we look at our financial service providers, our investors, our those who provide finance, being gender, meeting women where they are. And the unmet need for female or among female-owned SMEs and micro businesses in developing markets, providers need to identify and invest in solutions that cater to these diverse needs in the form of trade credit. I think collateral is something that has been mentioned, especially for MSMEs or the informal market, and how to innovate around that and find a way to get the information that you need in order to see the level of extent of credit that you can give them. So there's another form that we can do, like invoice discounting, or providing other digital forms of credit without over-indebting women consumers. But I mentioned collateral, and I mentioned some of the ways around that, but there are other things that affect how women participate in the economy, and social norms is a big part of that. I think in general, women have been left behind due to the position that they occupy in society, and that might mean that their level of education is behind that of men per se, or and because of that, their level of income is already behind as well. And then in terms of joining the workforce, it already means that your qualifications and your education, it's already behind. So the position that you're going to occupy in the workforce will disadvantage you as well. And even how you participate or how you engage in the labor market is going to be different from a man, and that produces more and more gaps. So those are some of the issues, and so those are some of the barriers that women face, or women-led entrepreneurs, or women who are participating in the female economy have to overcome in order for them to actually participate, in order for them to grow their startup, in order for them to scale and get into other regions of the market, and in order for them to be profitable. I think the profitability data of women against men, it's much lower, and the productivity of their businesses is much lower. And I'm sure that some of the panelists here can share more information, but there are a lot of issues that affect productivity of of a woman business owner. And usually women, we are time poor due to the other responsibilities or due to the care work, the unpaid care work that we perform. And so that affects how our business performs overall, or how we can expand and be innovative as well, due to just being time poor. So I think I'll stop there and ask you, Aude.
Thank you very much, Tariro. Two things. First, I want to welcome Ifeoma. Again, I've already introduced her, but just to say she's the founder of Shecluded, a fintech credit company aimed at women in Africa, based out of Nigeria. Welcome, Ifeoma. And just while you catch your breath and joining us, I'm going to turn to David, and then I'll turn to you with the next question, Ifeoma. But David, while you're here, can I ask you, in your view, what are the main barriers that you see in women's financial access in Africa?
Thank you, Aude. So right. So like Tariro touched on likely the variety of barriers that affect women. As MercyCorps, we work a lot with the underserved sector across multiple value chains in agriculture, in health, and so many diverse sectors. And we've seen a number of recurring issues that always affect women. Right. I'd say one major issue has to do with their economic advancement and opportunity overall, right? And this this is a barrier and it is driven by women's difficulty in accessing decent employment, um, their low incomes, and their low return on labor, which is also driven again by society's expectations of women around domestic care and domestic work and childcare, right? Tariro talked about time poverty. It's a big one. Another major issue has to do with their poor access to skills training or education, right? Again, this is fueled or hampered by women's mobility restrictions, again, due to their time poverty, a lot of cultural norms, and the digital gender divide, because increasingly a lot of stakeholders are beginning to employ digital channels to train. And so that digital gap also sort of prevents them from getting empowered and receiving the skills that they need. Another barrier is basically limited access to assets and living support services. Again, that is fueled by negative societal beliefs around women's ownership of assets. And then, very important, I think, something that is always being touted by a lot of development agencies is the agency issue, very limited agency and decision-making power, right? And this is driven a lot by, again, cultural, religious beliefs in about what women should and can exercise control over, right? And we see a lot of instances of this in even savings groups and other leadership structures where you see the elite capture phenomenon happening. You have a lot of, maybe you have a savings group of about 30 people, maybe 70% of them are women, but the 30% who are men in influential positions. And so they make all the key decisions. They are the ones who end up getting the training, the digital training. If loans are being disbursed, some of them can actually siphon the funds away, and it's a bit of a challenge. So these are persistent barriers that we've seen recur across a lot of our implementations, whether it has to do with like displacement circles, food security, right? Diverse areas, health as well.
Thank you so much, David. And now, Ifeoma, I'd love to turn to you, given your career as a founder of a fintech. Can I ask you, what are the barriers that affect fintechs in reaching the women's market in Africa?
Thank you so much for that question. So while we're sorting out my video, I would like to answer that. First of all, the first barrier is that's preventing fintechs from reaching women is one, communication. So we found out that when we started Shecluded, communication makes all the difference. So when we started, we met women and we said, come and take loan for your business. And they said, no, they started this tale of my grandmother took loan and her business died or she got into a lot of trouble. But when we changed the communication to say, hi, I see that you need a new laptop to be able to produce differently. Come and get a laptop and pay and spread it out and spread out the repayment. We found out that made a difference. So communicating women based on the need to solve their problem, as against telling them to buy a banking product, did make a difference. Another thing that we found out was that as a fintech company, you need to understand what it's like, just putting yourself in the customer's shoe. What are the challenges that women entrepreneurs face? And how can you solve for them? How can you design product for them? So when we started again, another thing that we noticed was that we started saying, where do women play in trade? What was driving that trade? It was the fact that some of them can sit down in the comfort of their home and have Instagram pages and just make money from the comfort of their home. So we launched a campaign to start saying, empowering you at home. And we saw that they welcomed that to be able to deal with us. A research that was done by the CBN as regards that what are the top 3 things that are hindering women from accessing finance and just being able to contribute more economy. We found that trust was one of them. Do they trust you? Do they think that they trust you? Is a key then. Then we start talking about the fact that I feel that more things that fintechs need to be able to do is to also know that from our experience, women don't want another technology to put on their life. They want to be able to solve their problems. So we quickly learned that after we built our first product and no women came, we started going to communities and we now use technology as a means to reach more women. So rather than building a product to saying, oh, they need to come here because their needs need to be met. So those are the things that we learned from the session. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ifeoma. This is really interesting. And before we turn to issues of design and delivery, I just want to bounce a bit on that comment you just made, Ifeoma, about putting yourself in your female customers' shoes. And I want to ask all 3 of you, how important do you think is it to have female leadership and female diversity within financial service providers? Do you think that having more women at the top of financial service provision can help translate into kind of better putting yourself into the woman's shoes, as Ifeoma just said? Tariro, maybe do you want to start and then David?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think women's leadership is a theme that has been reverberating throughout the day and how important it is. I think when we're especially when we're designing for women, or just to make organizations more innovative and more competitive, there is research to say that diverse organizations perform better. So I think when we put women in leadership positions or when we put women at the table for product design, then we kind of are bringing context to the customer that we would like to serve. I think financial institutions or financial products were really designed for a market that they knew, that they had data on, that they understood, that they knew would behave in a certain way. So it's about risk, right? So a certain level of woman customer, or a low income or a vulnerable woman customer, or maybe a woman in the rural area would be a customer that would be deemed risky. So is a micro business owner that is trying to feed their household, as well as make a little bit of profit in order to pay school fees, in order to be able to respond to health emergencies. Maybe the data on that woman may not be the ones that is understood, or that traditional financial markets or bigger financial providers are used to. So I think we're talking about again. I think sorry, or can you ask the question again so I remember?
I think you've kind of addressed it. I was just asking about the leadership and how that might trickle down. And maybe, David, to you, and I'm grateful for you bringing some gender diversity to this panel, but can you tell us a bit more, in particular, from your work at MercyCorps, how leadership and their views on, and then the diversity of leadership can trickle down into the product design, product delivery, and the importance placed on serving women customers better?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, so coming from an institution, MercyCorps, that is actually led by a woman, our CEO is actually a woman, and I think that really helps with being very intentional about gender, right? We are, I think, in general, at the institutional level, it's we all know, we are all very familiar with the fact that a lot of institutions, financial institutions, or generally majority of corporate institutions are headed by men, and not just headed, but usually the C-suite or the executive team has majority men, right? If we're able to get more women into some of these senior leadership positions, clearly it sort of helps them to advocate to have more women at the table, right? And not just in the C-suite, but throughout the organization. Now, what that does is, apart from the fact that, I mean, that is a good signal to donors that are pursuing gender lens investments. It also helps a lot of the product development process to be gender intentional, because you have women who in the institutions who can identify with the needs and the challenges that women typically face, right? It makes gender product design easier, to be honest. It helps in sort of validating some of the product assumptions. If you come up with a product and some assumptions you need to, it helps to have a woman say, no, this will fly, this will not fly. We've been in these communities. It's very difficult to have that, and for you to do gender product design very well if everything is still in a man's world. So yes, there are some clear benefits, right, from the gender lens investment side, from the product development side. There are some very important benefits.
Thank you, David. Ifeoma, I'd love to turn to you and ask you, from your experience in fintech, have you designed and tailored products specifically for the women's market, or is it more about the way you deliver and market those products and less about the design per se? Thanks. And then Tariro, I might ask a question to you.
So thank you very much. I think first is, I would say, for both. So first of all, when you're designing a product and a financial service for women, you need to know that most women suffer from time poverty. So how short can this be done? And if you're dealing with MSME women, you need to know that sometimes they don't have very skilled people on their team. So she might actually be doing this on her own. So it needs to be very simple. I always tell my team, make sure that my 5-year-old can go through the product and understand it. It helps conversion, it helps completion. We've tried very complex problems and technology, and we've tried simple technology. And we noticed that simple technology did wise. I mean, they got to the end of it. There are some requirements that we feel that we left out for second stage. When we felt that, she has gone through the first stage and it's easy and it's done. I noticed that our women at that stage, women are more open to say respond, because she felt like she has passed the first barrier. Another thing that I've noticed is that most women like being communicated to. So how do we incorporate? So if you go to some websites, you see, oh, you're almost there, keep going on. How do we make sure that the process doesn't feel like she's alone? Like it feels like there's somebody we had through that journey saying, oh, you're almost there, you're 20% away from there. Do you know that right now you just need this to be able to complete that step? So how do you build a technology that makes it feel that you can and hold that woman? Then when it also comes to, the other parts that are basically non-technology driven, which is just, communication, marketing, the things around. I always tell people, most of our acquisition for you don't see us in terms of acquisition strategy. You're just going to pay an influencer or just advertising. It's usually towards acquisition and towards, I think for us as a company, we're very, very impact driven. So we can say, if I say I want to get in 10,000 women, I can say I want to train 10,000 women in digital marketing. And that way I'm able to get the pipeline that I want. So our pipeline, instead of just blank line advertising to say, come and take loan for this on a billboard, we'll actually go to communities or target communities where we feel that those women are, and we'll try to do something to say increase your income. And one of the ways to increase your income is to get assets to be able to produce more. I don't know if that makes sense. So for us, it's a mixture of both. But product designing, product that are intelligent, fast, intuitive, they don't feel alone. Having customer support there at the meantime, being able to tell them, hey, you can come to our office. We've had people just show up in the office and they say, I saw you online, I was applying and I said I wanted to check to know if this is real. So thank you very much.
Thanks. This is super interesting. And so Tariro, I'd love your view on this. Is it about the design or is it about the delivery and the marketing?
I think a little bit of both. And I love that Ifeoma touched on trust. I think for some of the women customers or a group of women customers, or most people in general, trust is a big issue. But women customers are very price sensitive. So, you don't want to deal with any complication. And Ifeoma spoke about simplifying things. So you don't want to deal with hidden fees or anything like that. And it doesn't mean that I don't have money or I don't want to grow or I don't want to participate in the formal financial system, but it's because it's not meeting my need. It's not relevant to what I want. It's not speaking to my need, and it speaks in a language that I can't understand. So that's why a lot of consumer protection and financial literacy or some kind of training is very, very important. Even when we become innovative on platforms and we start opening up a lot of innovation, a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity for the women customer, for them to access more products or for them to access more markets. It comes with a lot of sensitivity in data issues, and fraud is a big thing now as we become more and more digitalized. And even the kind of device that I have, I mean, for the largest context within our continent, USSD is the kind of way to transact or engage if you're going to have some kind of a mobile wallet or some kind of a mobile product that you're going to offer customers. All of that is very important to see the gaps that are there and where the women customer is in the different continents that we serve. And of course, designing and being gender intentional. I think the way we interact with our money and the way we spend is gendered in some way. Women may spend more on the household issues. Women might have less control or do understand the household needs. There's a lot of household data that we need to consume when we are designing for women. And it depends also on what the kind of job that they do. I think we spoke about informal markets and how they participate in their seasonal income. I think all of these things are issues that financial services providers should consider. And I come again to data and how you know your customers' behavior. All of those things build up to gender intentional product design. And if Ifeoma spoke about community issues, I think that's why savings groups have been researched for a lot of time and have been tried to support and even digitize them at the last mile, trying to, open up to new products because they work, and they work because there's a community aspect to it. We're doing it together. And there's a trust element. I'm being held accountable to a lot of people who support me, who I can go to and who I trust, unlike a financial services provider. And also, even when we are introducing them to digital financial services, the community aspect can come with agents, right? You still rather speak to someone. You still have somebody who will introduce you to the digital side of it. So those are some of the issues I think that have been documented in research, or even the financial services providers who are doing it well. They are probably implementing some of those things, pairing with the credit and some training, credit and some technical assistance, credit and some kind of support, some kind of business support, some training or budgeting, inventory management, all of those things that make sure and supports the woman customer because of the gaps that already exist, because of social norms and. So I'll stop there, Aude.
Thank you. I want to turn to David because you work with a particular segment of women, which are women refugees and internally displaced, in particular in Uganda. I'd love to ask you there about the specific. Does MercyCorps specifically design products for this segment, or is it more about the way you deliver the products to these women? Over.
All right, thank you. So MercyCorps usually works with partners, private sector actors, to deliver products and services. In our case, financial products and services. So we will typically work with. We may receive some grants, funding, or contracts, and then work with a bank or an MFI or a fintech, right? And so in terms of whether it is about design or delivery or marketing, right? If gender should be considered for any or all of them, I'd say that it actually affects all of them. We've seen repeatedly that the way a product is designed, the way it's delivered, the way it's marketed really can affect uptake among women, right? If you don't design with if you are designing a financial product and as a bank or an MFI and you don't have right from the design stage, you don't take certain considerations into account, right? You're not going to see uptake. So if we take something like even the group lending product, which is very popular among refugees here in Uganda, both host and refugee populations, you see that it is designed to reach as many women as possible, because the observation is that a lot of women prefer groups, right? They feel more comfortable in groups. So, because many of them are unable, they don't meet some of the stiff or the traditional collateral requirements from the banks or the MFIs, right? Banks design products using a group lending methodology in the case of loans, right? So the group becomes that's mechanism to becomes a collateral. That social pressure within the group is what they use to circumvent the traditional collateral barriers. And again, if you look at something like even agent banking, right? We've seen that within some of these communities, when women respond better when they are approached by other women, right? A lot of women, the trust issue that Tariro talks about is very true. Women agents tend to inspire more trust, even for men. Even men, you tend to to trust more women agents more than their fellow their fellow males, and so that is a typical delivery mechanism that we see is it responds much better. Women respond much better if you decide to integrate women. So across the board, product design level, delivery, marketing, you need to be intentional. And I suppose that's what makes it hard. That's what makes it difficult because it's not just let me just select this aspect and improve the gender side. You need to work across the spectrum and make sure that at every touch point you are making it as responsive to women as possible.
Thanks so much, David. And Tariro, maybe let me ask you, we had Ifeoma talk about the untapped business potential of women and the fact that we needed better data and better segmentation to understand the size of this market, understand the needs of this market. Could I ask you to reflect on that and tell us, do you think we have the data we need? Financial service providers in Africa have the data they need to design and take into account women's preferences and needs. That's for you, Tariro, and then Ifeoma, just as a lineup, asking you the same question for fintechs. Do fintechs have the data they need to serve the woman segment in the right way? So maybe Tariro, you first, and then Ifeoma.
I think financial services providers have been collecting data for different purposes, and maybe they've been collecting data that helps them with their profitability, helps them to market size, helps them to see, what they're doing in their portfolios. Now, that's the data that they collect consistently and have maybe more historical information, but gender disaggregating it and seeing the trends from a gendered point of view is an issue. I think that still needs gaps. I think data collection methodologies are an issue that we've talked about, I think, throughout the day, and we can see room for improvement, right? And then the regulator on the other side now comes in with mandates to report back in this way and gives them the data that they need in order to have an overall view and provide that market intelligence to the whole market. But in the compliance issues or in the demands of the financial services provider themselves, and if they haven't really been intentional about serving a woman customer, they might just see it as something that is a burden to them, and that affects the data quality that is sent over to the regulator or that is produced, or their investment in actually producing quality data or data that can be used by the market. So this affects the whole ecosystem of providing data, but we know the importance of data, and we know the importance of data-driven or evidence-based decision making, whether it's for your own product or from a policy level. So I think there's a lot of improvement, but we do have demand-side data that is provided, like FinDex, and FinScope in each country that also comes in and helps out. So I think there is room for improvement in data collection from financial service providers. Aude?
Ifeoma, over to you. I'm thinking that maybe the fintech ecosystem is a bit more kind of data driven or data conscious than the general financial service provision in Africa. But can I ask you to reflect on that? Do fintechs have the data they need to be serving women clients and adapting to their preferences and their needs?
So I mean, I first want to acknowledge the progress that I've made in terms of the last 5 years and in terms of the last decades. I think we now are more conscious of even having gender segregated data, which is something that didn't used to happen before. In terms of what to look for, how to look for it, how to put patterns together, I feel there's still a lot of work, but I'm glad that companies and like institutions are are providing like research focus for some fintechs to use. In terms of in terms of using the data to be able to shape their work, I think at the end of the day, for most business, it's always about the bottom line. I feel that that's where, there's a challenge between we found these inferences from the data just on women. Does it make sense to make these changes? Does it increase our revenue? And that's where I noticed that there is not a very one-to-one correlation with them, and that's where they struggle. But I mean, I feel that over time, with more data and maybe at some point when women get richer, it will make sense to be able to adjust with some of the learnings from those data. But yes, there's first level collecting data. Second level, what kind of data is useful? I feel that there's more research work to be needed there. Then third level, how do we use the data to create intelligent projects or products that serve women? It's still does this make sense to change? Does this increase our bottom line? And sometimes it's like, not on the short term. And it's like, okay, let's just keep that learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we've heard from Tariro, David, and you about, women's kind of the social norms affecting how women interact with financial services, their greater risk awareness, their need for more trust, many different types of norms affecting how they interact with financial services. So I'd like to ask all three of you, how can financial institutions, and in your case, Ifeoma, how can fintechs encourage more women to explore entrepreneurship? How can we help women, become more engaged in the economy? What can financial services do there? David, do you want to start?
Sure. So that's something that a recent project was actually trying to do. I mean, specifically for the refugees. We did note that financial literacy training, business training, even digital training is great, right? But it has a limit. If you are going to rely on just that, on just maybe a couple of trainings, you're not going to transform a woman's life. What we realized is that beyond even follow-on trainings or refresher trainings, mentorship is very important, right? Mentorship usually by women, right? So identifying those change agents, those female change agents in the community, those women that have made it successfully, those who have been able to turn their businesses around using capital, right? And helping them directly support the others, sort of a look over my shoulder approach, right? It really helps. It works wonders. And so because of that learning, we actually commissioned a separate TA component just for that, to TA components to offer more mentoring services to some of the grassroots institutions, the refugee-led organizations that we're working with. So mentorship is very important. It makes it come to life. They see someone who has made it, they can receive counseling, they can receive guidance, and it helps them transform. The person can help them course correct where they need to. I'd say also that basically being offering like being a bit creative about the kind of financing that you offer, right? Small businesses. So I'm talking about flexible financing, flexible repayment terms, right? That sort of match the irregularities of income patterns of women, particularly for small business entrepreneurs. We all know how difficult it is I mean, the cash flow is always a big issue. So if you can design, if you are providing startup capital, right, you need to make sure that repayment terms are a bit flexible. You can't go the normal monthly route. If they are not farmers, and they are in a particular maybe trade value chain, you need to look specifically at the value chain, see how the cash flow cycles work, and then tailor the repayment models to that. So that's a bit more data inquiry, a bit more product design, right? A bit more adjustments to make sure that the product that you're offering, the loan that you are giving, right, is something that is actually going to help them actually move past just that first year to maybe move beyond the second or third year, because a lot of businesses collapse simply because they are not able to service their debt. So being a little bit creative about how you structure your repayments can make a big difference to women.
Tariro, can I ask you the same about how do you take into account the specific norms that affect women in the design of your financial services?
Okay. So I think you first asked about how women can, or financial services providers can sort of like encourage women to participate in the economic system. I think what we know from the financing gap, 1.7 trillion, it means that there's a demand. And if we then look at the informal markets, that gap is even wider. So there's a demand there. So I think for financial services, what we should be saying is, look at the data, there's a demand and there's a big opportunity. The 1.7 trillion is a big opportunity. And therefore, now we come to how do we tap into it? How do we make sure that women are participating? And a lot of things have been talked about here that we already know about women being time poor, and the different levels of education, different levels of income. But I think it's important to use training, right? I'll come back to training. And it's important to build networks. I think even to tap into the networks that exist. And I'm sure there are different kinds of networks that women participate in. It depends in the income group, in the group that you are in. But I think we can build on that, right? And make sure that there's information being passed. There's somebody who spoke about communication. It's very important to be sharing that or giving that information in order for someone to participate, because if I don't know about it, and it's all in our behaviors, in our gendered behaviors. I don't know, maybe men talk about these things more often in their networks, or they find ways of getting the information. If we talk about devices as a tool for getting information, in some households, a device is a form of power. It's given to the head of the house, and therefore maybe having access to that can be an issue for some groups. And so all of that then affects how we then participate with the financial system itself. In terms of social norms, I think that's a big issue. There are cultural issues that can then be replicated even in different forms in the workplace and in the design of who gets to design and what they bring within their bias into the actual product. All of those things affect what then happens or what then we see play out in the market, which gives rise to persistent gender gaps that we've seen from the data that we have. So culture issues are slow to change, but the raising awareness and education can definitely help. Aude.
Actually, that's exactly a question I wanted to ask all three of you, is what role can financial education play, or at least financial empowerment? Is there something we can do through, financial education campaigns or specific outreach on financial education? Maybe Ifeoma from the tech and fintech and digital financial service perspective, David in particular with your women and refugees angle, and then to re-roll with your DFS point of view. Thank you. Ifeoma, please, over to you.
So I feel that, just building off from the last question, I think you skipped me. But first things first, let's look at the data. 58% of MSMEs in Africa are run by women. And the problem is not that women are starting businesses. The problem are women are not growing more than micro or nano businesses. I feel the first thing is just advocacy to say, women, it's okay to be rich. And sometimes when we do our campaign and our information session, I discuss with women and I notice that subconsciously many women want to do activities. They don't want to be rich. That's why you're running that business and it's not growing and you've been there for the last 15 years. You're looking for company. So I noticed that just working on their mindset on why it's okay to be wealthy is actually a first step to financial education, to enabling women to be able to just aspire more. So typically for all our trainings for women, we find that that is the most impactful part of the training because it's a mindset stuff. Their mother was not rich, their grandmother was not rich, but they were businesswomen. So they just came in and they pushed the pattern. So once we open and we're able to create that new mindset for them, that is the first financial education that we want. That financial education, once we have that, we start building upon it to start saying, are you in the right business? Should you shut it down? Should you build it down? Like just being that bullish with women to say it's okay to change and it's okay to do stuff is the first thing I noticed in terms of our financial education that has done a lot. Then we build upon it to start saying, okay, the business education, your financial education is directly and strongly related to your business, because right now you're an entrepreneur, and just being able to make her understand why that matters. I noticed that it builds, so like I said, many women want to solve their problem, and that includes maybe money problem, but the how is where they struggle. So just establishing the end point where we want to go. Some of them, in fact, we go as far as say, how much do you want to make? And we see them 1 month later say, hey, you know what? I think I need to shut down this business. That's the first thing that we do in terms of designing our financial education. Then upon that, we now start building on the normal things that are in the market, like saying you pay yourself well, if you're running a business, try to have a company account, try to formalize it, try to think about this business like as if it's going to grow and be something. So I noticed that that education is something that we've seen, and we have more than so many feedback on how it did change their mindset of just how to think about finances and how to plan their finances. So we do that and we also do the regular, how to think about your finances and the normal education, the financial education. Thank you.
Great. And so just to the previous question, and sorry for skipping you, can you tell us a bit more, Tariro and David, maybe to start, how can financial services help overcome this question of risk awareness, trust, and these social norms that might affect women in wanting, as Ifeoma said, wanting to be rich or wanting to become entrepreneurs? How can financial services, use financial literacy, financial empowerment training to help better reach women and engage them and activate them as clients? Maybe David, with your specific lens on women refugees, and then to Tariro.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So it's not an easy task, because it's, a lot of these are grounded in culture, sometimes even religion, right? And what we have done, very much related to my earlier point, was on identifying female leaders, right? Successful businesswomen, and then using them to inspire the other women as well. So we try to, and then even setting them up as mentors where it's possible, because we've done a lot of, as a working in the development space, humanitarian space, yes, the space is rife with training, digital literacy training, financial literacy training, business literacy training, which are all good, are all great, right? But there's a point where sometimes it becomes too theoretical, and people need to see reality, right? So that mentoring piece, bringing someone real, a woman, to mentor them, makes a big difference. The other thing I'll like to maybe also highlight is the fact that specifically within the refugee space, we've been working a lot with refugee-led organizations, right? These are grassroots institutions that are set up within the communities, the refugee communities, and provide the refugees with support, with livelihood support, with psychosocial support, and things like that, right? They are very influential within the refugee community, and we noted that working, being very intentional with selecting women-led, refugee-led organizations, women-led RLOs, right? We're able to accomplish a bit more, because we realize that a lot of women's issues, a lot of women tend to be underrepresented in mixed RLOs, like where you have men and women, but where you have an RLO that is being spearheaded by women, the directorship are largely women, you have a lot of their issues being brought to the fore, right? Even when when we connect these RLOs to financial institutions, right, their voices are amplified better, be able to sit down and really discuss, talk to them about their pain points, and you don't have any awkwardness in the room, because sometimes a lot of women, sadly, they tend to be quiet, reserved when the men are in the room, because they feel the men have to speak first. But when you target women RLOs, you eliminate a lot of those barriers. So we've had some successes with that, and where I think for other entities that who may be working with refugees, displaced populations, internally displaced populations, I would recommend that as a positive step. Yeah, to identify them and then empower them, work with them, connect them to market access.
Thanks, David. And over to you, Tariro, for the closing comment. What role do you see of financial literacy and financial empowerment and even mentorship, as David said, to drive women's economic participation in Africa? Can you reflect on that?
Yeah, I can only reference the growth of mobile money across sub-Saharan Africa and why it's successful. And I think that's anchored on the growth of agents themselves alongside the growth of mobile money. So and growth provides that training touch point for the customer that's possibly hard to reach. So, and it's bringing in the human element of it. It's bringing in the trust. It's bringing in the community, all the things that we spoke about here. So, and a lot of successful big banks are not doing it well, even for some customer groups that you think are more literate, because they don't provide that information. And that's why, from a regulatory perspective, consumer protection is very important, because then everything is so complicated and everything is the language, you actually don't know their hidden fees, and you then find yourself in a situation where you're in a product that you didn't understand from the first point. So financial literacy is an important anchor to building strong financial ecosystem, especially for the woman customer. And I think starting, with the literacy quite young is very important. That's why I know there's some work that Farai, one of your guest speakers in the other session, that she does campaigns, and they train young women or just the youth in general about capital markets, about investments, about financial systems. So if you start young, then the concept of participating in the economy or participating in a financial system is nothing that's too scary. Like you said, and social norms affects a woman's confidence. You already think maybe I'm not as educated, or maybe I'm not. For some people it's a big issue, and then for you to quite engage in those intimidating products without knowing, do I have all the information? Is that something that's being hidden from me, or are they out to get me, or they just want my money? I've worked so hard for it. It becomes a big issue. So again, pairing financial education, financial literacy, digital literacy, privacy issues, all of those things, pairing them with the products that we then introduce to the female economy is very important.
Thanks so much, Tariro. And we have comments in the chat suggesting that financial literacy is really important from an early age. So seems to resonate with others here. With that, I want to encourage you to continue the conversation by joining FinEquity Africa, participating in our knowledge sharing, best practices, discussion around the women's economic empowerment through financial inclusion. And without further ado, want to also encourage everyone to join the Gender Equality Changemakers Award ceremony just right after this, to wrap up our day today with the Pathway to 17 Summit. So hoping to see you at the Gender Equality Changemakers Award ceremony in just a little bit of time. And with that, many thanks to our speakers and participants today. Thank you.